Okay. So today's psalm, which is Psalm 64, is a bit of a departure from where we've been until now. So far, we've been very focused on David's history, the people who betrayed him, the people who pursued him, the Mishigatsi went through. And it is true, according to some commentators, that this psalm may be about David running and fleeing from Shaul HaMelech, King Saul. However, most agree that this psalm is about Daniel, the prophet Daniel, okay, who has an entire book, the book of Daniel, in the Tanakh. So, and by the way, this is Rashi and Midrash that say this as well as others. So significant commentators. This is referring to, say our commentators, the 6th book of Daniel, in which he was involved in a difficult situation with Darius the Mede, and the upshot was he was thrown into the lion's den. And if you're not familiar with the story, we will go over it today. Okay, so we have to keep in mind, again, I see there's some new names that I don't recognize, that when we say Psalms, we must do what Rebbe Nachman and others tell us to do, but Rebbe Nachman specifically emphasizes to us that we should find ourselves in the words of King David, okay? And even though Daniel happened after the times of King David, David also was a prophet, and we know that he redacted and organized the book of Psalms. So we know for Hashem that there is no time before, during, and after. How this works with this book, it's a little bit of a mystery to me. So we won't go there because it's a paradox. But what we will do is we'll try to find not only the historical aspects of Daniel, the inspiration of the tzaddik who is Daniel, but also we'll try to find ourselves in this psalm as well. Okay, so let's begin. Lamanatseach Mizmor LeDavid, for the conductor, a song of David. And what we have to remember is that Lamanatseach, which we've discussed before in previous classes, is related to the word. The root of the word is actually netzach. Okay, it's actually not quite the root, but it's the same root. They both have the same root, netzach, which means victory. And in the parlance of the Spiros and Rebbe Nachman's insight, it means eternal victory. Because for any victory to truly be a victory, it has to be eternal. Okay, a temporary victory is a reprieve from battle or war. It's not a victory, only lasting victory. And that's why we know that Melech HaMashiach is going to lead us into a period of eternal victory. Until then, in essence, except for our own personal victories and the victories of the tzaddikim, the victories in this world come and go. We won't go too much into that today. We've discussed this in the past. Okay. Shema Elohim Koli, V'sichi mipachad oyev titzur chayai. Okay. Hear, O Elohim, my voice, in prayer, expressing my woes, from the dread of the enemy, the pachad, the terror, guard my life. So we're going to enter right into the story. This is Daniel praying, expressing his woes. What were his woes? So we have to understand the story of Daniel in the 6th chapter. So let's back up. Daniel survived Nebuchadnezzar. He survived King Belshazzar. And now he was dealing with the Persian / Median king, King Darius, okay, who may or may not have been a grandchild of Esther, depending on your source. And Darius was an invader who took over Babylon, okay? And Darius wasn't the world's worst guy. The first thing he did when he got to Babylon, Bavel, was to appoint 120 satraps. These were like functionaries who were nobles, so they had some power. They had quite a bit of power. It was a massive nation, a massive land. And also he appointed 3 viziers. What is a vizier? It's a higher level of functionary advisors to the king, which now Darius was. Daniel was appointed by Darius to be one of these 3. He saw Daniel's wisdom. He knew his past history, which again, we're not going to go into today, but I encourage you to read the book of Daniel. It's quite just an amazing story. There are parallels to Yosef HaTzadik with the story of Daniel, and these viziers and the satraps were very, very jealous of Daniel. They just were jealous. So why were they jealous? They also had the king's ear. So this Daniel was very wise, and he had genuine prophecy, and he was a tzaddik. And even though we're taught when it comes to ayin hara, okay, even though we're taught, and we should recognize that the best way to beat ayin hara is to not have it, number 1, and to number 2, be modest and humble. But sometimes, says the Rebbe, says there'll be conflict. People they'll be jealous of you. They'll pursue you for whatever reason. This is Daniel's situation. Again, they all also had the king's ear. Now, they wanted to take Daniel down. And we'll go into a little bit more details. We'll pick up the thread as we go through this, but the way that they did this was they convinced Darius to make a law that said people had to make requests or petition only the king. They couldn't petition most idols. There's a question about whether one idol was okay or not. They couldn't petition Hashem. They couldn't petition each other. The satraps and the 2 other viziers said, nope, Hashem's out too. You have to petition the king. So we enter into this psalm where I mentioned here, O Elohim, my voice is expressing my woes. From dread of the enemy, guard my life. So Daniel stopped going to shul. Medrash says he didn't go to shul. He decided to daven at home because he wasn't required to risk his life in order to request from Hashem or to daven to Hashem. Why? Because this wasn't a situation where he was being forced to convert. It wasn't he was being forced to convert to another religion. He was just not supposed to ask anybody for help but Darius. And Daniel also was such a stickler for truth that he followed the law in that when he davened in his private apartments, he didn't go to shul. What he did was he didn't ask Hashem anything up until the point of this first verse. What he did was he praised Hashem and he thanked Hashem. That's what he was busy doing. However, the enemy, the satraps, laid in wait for him. They convinced a housemaid to report, to spy for them. And she said, hey, he's up there praying. That's what he's doing in his apartment on the third floor, or whatever it was. And they stormed the house and they caught him praying. And that's when he cries out in pachad, from the terror that they want to impose on me, this enemy, guard my life. Okay. We can see, we can see why David included this in Sefer Tehillim. We can see this. There's a lot of parallels to his life. Now, now this is also interesting. I have to say, I have so many sforim on Tehillim. The Art Scroll commentary on Tehillim is fantastic, and they point out, if you ever are it's a 2-volume set, if you're ever in the mood to buy something like this, they point out that the Talmud tells us that the house where Daniel prayed, the whole house, so he prayed in his apartment or section of it, the house where he prayed was for many centuries a pilgrimage site, and that the rabbis of the Talmud would go to daven there because that's how powerful and holy his prayers were. And when you think about it, since he spent that time praising Hashem and thanking Hashem in order to follow the law of the land, this is unbelievable. I mean, it's quite a special kind of tzaddik who does this. So now his life is visibly threatened, and he cries out to Hashem. And we will go to Gimel, to the 3rd verse. Tas tireni misod merei. Merigishas poale aven. Hide me from the advice, the counsel of the wicked, and from the gathering of doers of evil. So Rashi tells us that Darius valued Daniel and he didn't want to punish him, but the satraps got together in an assembly. They grouped together, okay? And the Rebbe Nachman tells us that it's interesting. He tells us that sometimes the wicked have a power when they're united together that can even negatively affect a tzaddik, chas v'shalom. And of course, I always think of the Tower of Babel. Okay, another link to this, in which all the people who wanted to usurp Hashem, okay, in their little minds, they thought they could usurp Hashem. They built a tower to Hashem, up to the heavens. They thought they were going to reach it. And it's said that they weren't wiped out completely by Hashem in anger. Why? Amazing. Because they all worked together. They had achdus, they had unity. Okay. So Hashem values unity. When people get along, even for nefarious purposes, okay, the fact that they're all working together has some value. I don't pretend to understand the deeper reasoning behind this, but there is value. And I think it's really, we are all Hashem's creations. And I think that, what does a parent love to see? They love to see their children all getting along. So I'm assuming that that's part of the aspect or reasoning, if you could call it that, of this kind of situation. Okay, let's continue. So anyway, the message just is we should get along. All right. Okay. Asher shananu chacherev lishona darchu chitzam davar mar. Okay. So who sharpened or who whetted their tongue like the sword, who aimed a bitter word like their arrow? Now, in the past, David has referred to the Lashon Hara and the Motzi Shemra, which you can look at past classes for explanations of those, if the concept of Motzi Shemra might be new to you. He looked at that as arrows flung towards him. And that's because they have the power to wound. The sword has the power to wound. The sharp tongue has the power to wound at close up, and the Lashon Hara and Motzi Shemra, the words that go out, the negative words about somebody, the arrows fall all over the place at quite a distance. And even if they don't hit their target, they are hitting corresponding or related or nearby targets. So very, very dangerous. So Rashi says that this is what this is about. And you know, I just want to bring in, we don't always refer to too much sort of embedded or insights into too much Mussar in these, because I really want to bring in Rebbe Nachman's more positive comments and uplifting comments, but we have to, especially this time of year, it's Tammuz. And to really take from this, when we learn this song, that look, we have to really pay attention where our words go. This scourge of speaking ill of each other, okay, even if we do it in a sly way, okay, people do that too. Even if you say something positive that could increase a negative thought about someone, we really should learn these laws. We should really be careful, especially in the months of Tammuz and Av, which we are in. We are now in Tammuz. Okay, we all know the reasons for that. All right, let's continue. Okay, Liros bamistarim tam, pisom yoruhu velo yirau. To shoot in secrecy at the innocent, the tam, the wholesome person. Suddenly they shoot at him and they aren't afraid. So this is what people do. Okay, most people do this kind of stuff in secrecy. And this gives the person who's being gossiped about no recourse to self-defense. They can't say, wait a second, that's not exactly what happened. Wait a second, I was up praying, but I wasn't petitioning Hashem. I was praising him and thanking him, but I'm following your law, satraps. I'm following your law, King Darius. Okay. And anybody who's ever been, God forbid, the victim of this kind of Lashon Hara knows that if you don't have the ability to defend yourself, people will believe the first thing they heard, and vice versa. God forbid that we should be the ones engaging in this. Now, this is interesting. Rashi explains that as this is occurring, there were no stones in Babylon. Okay. Babylon, Bavel, people built everything from bricks made of clay. They would dig in the earth and they would make bricks. So that's another parallel to Mitzrayim, to Egypt. So we have that. We have a little bit with Yosef here. Like we see some of the themes repeating in new ways for us to, when themes repeat, they're important themes and they're ideas that we should pay attention to. Now, he says that Hashem sent angels to bring a large stone from Eretz Yisrael, because there were no stones in Babel, to cover the mouth of what? The place where Daniel was going to be thrown for violating this law, the lion's den. And the Midrash says that there was a malach, an angel, in the shape of a lion who guarded the edge of the pit to scare people away from coming in so they couldn't see what was going on. Now we're getting to the point where the people, they shoot at him, they're not afraid, and they run to Darius, and they will get to the next verse, and they're getting ready to throw him in the lion's den. They already know what they want to do with him. Okay. Hold on. Okay, 6 above. Yechaziku lamu davara. Yisaparu litmon mokashim amaru. Mi yire lamo. They encourage, there's two, I want to read two different translations. They press an evil matter upon him. They talk of concealing snares. They say, who will see them? Here it says they encourage themselves in an evil matter. Okay, so I like both these because it's reflexive. I like both these translations give us insight to what's going on. So first of all, they press this evil plan on Darius. They run to him, and tell on Daniel. We saw him praying. He's not allowed to do that. And they exaggerated what he was doing. They twisted it. And they said he was asking, he's making requests of Hashem, even though that wasn't true. And what these snares, these camouflage traps were, was they pretended to be concerned for the king's honor and glory. Okay, this is the gossiper supreme. This is what someone does. This is what somebody who's spreading rechilus does. What is rechilus? When you go and you tell someone something that someone else said about them. Okay, and they go, or something an action that affects them. And they say, oh, I only want to protect you. Oh, you should be aware. Oh, I want to protect your honor. Okay, now I'm not talking about a situation where somebody's being threatened. That's a different situation. I'm talking in general. So they went and they set this trap and they camouflaged it. Meanwhile, their whole goal was to take out Daniel, God forbid. Okay, so they ask at the end, who will see them, meaning who will see us, and they're referring to themselves in the third person here, because they're distancing themselves from this idea of being seen, of the truth being known, because they don't factor in that Hashem sees everything. Now, we have to understand in these times, it's not that people didn't believe in Hashem. Many of these people believed in Hashem, meaning they knew there was a Hashem. They knew it. They may also have believed in idols as intermediaries and so on, but many of them actually believed in Hashem. It's just that they limited Hashem in their understanding. So Hashem was just a God, lahavdil, like their gods, okay? So that he didn't have this all-seeing, all-knowing, the source of everything, not just creation, and that he somehow was just sitting back, letting people just live their lives, and that he wasn't intimately involved in all of us, and that he didn't know what was going on. When people do this, they limit Hashem. Hashem's greatness is such. This is so important. This is why we make hitbodedut. Hashem's greatness is such that he cares intimately about you and me. It's as if we are his only child, especially when we come to him in hitbodedut. How is that possible? Because he's Hashem. I don't know how it's possible. How can he hold all of this and all of us? He's Hashem. Hashem fills everything and he surrounds everything. And so by compartmentalizing Hashem, or by saying Hashem is here and here, but he's not there. Leave Hashem in houses of worship, or Hashem is divided into parts. All of this stuff is taking away from Hashem. And that's what these people did. They said, who's going to see us? Okay. Now, today we have, I will say, today we have a very bizarre breakdown of the public and the private realms. Okay, we see that today things that really should be private are public. And I'm not just talking social media. Okay, I'm not just talking social media, although that's the big part of it, is people don't have those boundaries anymore about what should be contained privately. At the same time, there's this idea that there's two faces that people have. The face for when people will see me, and the face for when no one is looking. Okay. Hashem is always looking. Okay, he's always there with us. So this whole idea is antithetical to Torah. This idea that we have a permission to do things in public that we don't in private, and private that we don't in public, with some exceptions. Okay, there are exceptions. Okay, but the exceptions aren't because we don't believe that Hashem is always with us. Exceptions might be out of necessity. You have to get undressed to take a shower. The exceptions might be to make a kiddush Hashem. You might go out of your way in public to do something that you might not push yourself so far out of your way in private, and so on. But we have to think about this. And this is a great topic for Hibodedut when we're alone with Hashem, or in Yichud with Hashem, or having a conversation with Him. How can I bring my selves, the various aspects of myself, into alignment? I'm not talking about the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the idea that we want to create a unified self, an actualized self. Okay. And in order to do that, well, we can read this verse and do the opposite. That would be a good starting place. Okay. It's something I don't know. I don't know. I think it's something we have to work on our whole lives. I don't know. I mean, maybe some of you have nailed this, but I certainly haven't. Okay. Let's continue. Oh, I will tell you, the place where I noticed this the most, these two faces, many, many, many years ago when I was in college. I lived in Great Britain, even beyond college, so for almost 4 years. And I was living a very different kind of life then, as many of you know. And at that point in time, I had some friends who were a certain background with titles. And I saw such a difference between when they let their hair loose versus how they were in public. And it really stuck with me. And even in my uninformed, uneducated self at that point, it really made a profound impression on me, and it affected me dramatically. Okay. All right, let's continue. Where are we? Zion, we're on 7. Yach pesu olos, tamanu chefes, mechupas v'kerev ish v'lev amok. Okay. So they search, or they seek out pretexts. They've completed a diligent search. Okay, so they're very careful and punctilious, hidden within man in the depths of the heart. So Rashi explains this as the other viziers and the satraps had to really search to see Daniel doing something wrong, but they searched their own hearts to get in touch with their most base, lowest selves. How can we justify to ourselves? I mean, these were no dummies. How could we justify to ourselves what we're about to do, this plot against Daniel? Okay. And others say that they weren't really searching within themselves. They were searching more directly with Daniel. Some say it's both. But the problem was he was a tzaddik and he was totally innocent. He says, Tom, he uses the word Tom. It's wholesome, innocent, and so on. So they had to lie. So Daniel also probed himself. Okay. He made Hespedidus, he made Hibodedut, to see how he needed to do tshuva because all this was happening to him. And that's the advice that, that's the advice our Rabbanim give us. If you see something's not going right in your life, look in the mirror. What do you have to fix? Is there a message for you? Is there something you have to do tshuva for? Okay, yes, it's true. But For Daniel, okay, he was totally innocent. He was totally pure with Hashem. And so he must have reached himself a deeper conclusion as to the reasons for this. And we know, again, going back to that theme I mentioned before, that even a tzaddik will face opposition. Okay, of course, we know this from the Rebbe. He speaks about this. And that's because there are other things going on in this world. We know that on the laws of spiritual physics, for every action, there has to be an equal and opposite reaction. So if something good is about to come out or be born or develop fully or express itself, then a negative force can rise up. And this is that battle. This is the battle with the Yetzer Hara, which can manifest in external events. It can. For example, the Rebbe tells us that when you are going to do something, specifically, he says, going to the tzaddik, traveling to the tzaddik. It's a very holy act, and it can save your neshama. It can turn your life around. The Rebbe promises that if we go to him, we put money in tzedakah, we say tikkun haklali, we confess at his holy gravesite, that he will span the length and breadth of heavens and earth to pull us out of Gehenna. Okay. Breslovers understand this to mean, yes, Gehenna in the next world, but Gehenna really is in this world. What is Gehenna? When we aren't as aligned with Hashem as we could be. That's Gehenna. That's when we really, really suffer. Okay. So Daniel saw that he was aligned with Hashem and that he was facing some kind of opposing forces, such as the manios, the obstacles that we might face when we travel to the tzaddik. Okay, by extrapolation, we can say in genuineness that this applies whenever you really want to do something that's the right thing to do, that has a lot of kedusha, and that really will be beneficial maybe for the world at large and maybe for your own neshama. Okay, you will encounter obstacles. All right, when to push through, when to not, that's a whole other discussion. You need to make it voted very often to figure this out. Okay, all right, but when you're going to the tzaddik, we should push through. We shouldn't give up. So here these people rationalize, they justify themselves. They're rotten people. Okay, they've all too much power. Okay, this is what happens when they were nobles, they had too much money, too much family, too much influence, too much power. And they felt they could do whatever they wanted with impunity. So they had gone to Darius and told him Daniel has to go in the lion's den. And Darius fought back. Okay, he said, he's a good guy. I really don't want to. I don't want to do this, but they pressured him and they manipulated him. And he realized that in order to retain his rule and the unity of the country, I mean, he was thinking politically, he was a very political person, we know from his history, that he felt that these are the ministers he appointed to advise him. He had to listen to them, but he didn't like it. And there's even a midrash which says that he actually went and visited Daniel after he threw him in the lion's den. But let's continue. That's a whole other point. Okay. Where am I? Yes. Okay. 8. Vayoram Elohim Chetz Pisom Hayu Makosa. Then Elohim shot at them an arrow. Suddenly they were wounded, or suddenly the wound was just appeared. Okay, so we have this word pisom again, or like you remember ma pitom. Okay, so that's suddenly. There's a lot of sudden shifts in this psalm. There's at least a couple of them. I think there are 2 of them. And so these, this is a reminder to us, at least I take it as a reminder that things can suddenly change around. Okay. Keharif Hashem, um, uh, Yeshua's Hashem Keharif Ayin. Okay, the salvations of Hashem come in the blink of an eye. They come suddenly. Listen, 1 minute you're headed in one direction, and the next minute you're headed. Something comes along and it saves you. There's a salvation. Okay. Let's continue. So Hashem, Elohim shot an arrow at them suddenly. So what happened? Here's what happened. They went to the lion's den the next morning. Daniel was thrown at night. Okay, there was more than one lion. In the fables, there's one lion. There was more than one lion. And they saw Daniel standing there. The lions didn't touch him. And the satrap said, well, it's not that he's innocent. They must be full from their meal they had the other days. And they told Darius, that's just what it is. And Darius said, oh yeah, he finally had enough. And he told the satraps that he was going to test out their theory. So he took all 120 of them, the two other viziers, the 122 wives of the satraps and viziers, and one child of each, another 122, totaling 366 of them. And he threw them in the lion's dens. He said, okay, you spend the night in the lion's den. If they're full, they're not going to touch you. Now, Rashi and the Midrash tell us that there were 4 times the number of lions that there were people. There were 1,464 lions. That's my math. So my arithmetic. So if I'm wrong, forgive me. And it made short work of them. It ate them all. It ate all of them up, just spit out the bones. Okay. So what's going on here? So this is a salvation for Daniel. It's sudden. Okay. And their own tongue brought it upon themselves. They didn't know when to stop talking. Okay. They didn't know when to stop talking. And Darius, okay, he still had flaws, but he had had enough. So this reminds me, when I read this, of a story of the Rebbe's, an incidental story, that there was a little Jewish town, and the Tsar's army rode through the town, and one of the guys from the army said, I need to requisition all your horses because I have to deliver mail from the Tsar. And he wanted to take their horses, and they had to bribe him to keep their horses. Okay. He gave him a lot of money. And then another guy, a captain in the army, came along, and he said to them, I'm going to requisition your horses. I need to deliver mail for the army. And if you don't want me to take your horses, you have to pay me so much money. And they said, look, another guy, one of your guys was just through here. He just did the same thing. We're out of money. I mean, what do you want from us? We'll give you the pennies we have left. And the Rebbe explains that this captain in the Tsar's army had a moment of clarity. And he said, you know what? This isn't fair. You're right. I'm not going to persecute you. And he left. Did he go on to the next town and demand a bribe from them? Probably. But there's a point, the Rebbe says, where everybody reaches and they say, enough is enough. Enough is enough. This isn't fair anymore. Even if I was all on board with this scheme, with this plan, with this idea, I have now reached the limits because my own sense of justice is kicking in. And everybody has that at some point inside them. Most people do. There are total Rishayim maybe that don't. But even corrupt people, even very corrupt people, have a point where they say, I can't do this anymore. Hopefully they reach that point while they're alive. Okay. Let's see. Where are we? All right, we'll continue. V'yach shiluhu alemo lishonam yisnodedu kol ro'e vam. That which they hoped would make him stumble. They were that which they hoped to make him stumble. Their tongue brought upon them. All who see them will shake their heads. I referred to this already in the previous discussion. Okay, Vayiru'u kol adam veyagidu poal Elohim umaasehu hiskilu. Then all men feared, and they declared that the work of Elohim and understood his deed. So they had this quality of yira. Okay, they had this quality of awesome fear, reverence, and a recognition of the power of Hashem. And Darius himself wrote part of the book of Daniel. He wrote a proclamation to his people. And he said he wrote this to all peoples, nations, and languages that lived in the land. And he basically said, it's very interesting. He said that that everyone should quake and be awestricken, should have fear, yira, before the God of Daniel, before Hashem. Why? Because he's a living God. He exists forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, and he will reign until the end. And he continues, he points out, he saves and rescues and performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who saved Daniel from the hands of the lions. And then the Tanakh tells us that Daniel went on to prosper in this kingdom of Darius. Okay, and throughout his kingdom in Persia as well. It's now, this was all included in his kingdom. So Daniel did very well after this. He had a life that that he went through a lot when he was younger, but he was able to not only have spiritual success, but he had material success in this world as well. Okay, let's continue. Yismak tzadik badonai v'chasavo v'yishalalu kol yishrei lev. The righteous will rejoice with Hashem and take shelter in him, and all the upright of heart, all the straight of heart will find glory. So this says, the commentators, is a promise that those who are righteous and rejoice with Hashem, they're happy that they are close to Hashem, and the upright of heart will find glory. But let's examine this a little closer. I have some different comments here from Chovos Halabovos. Then I have this commentary here. What time is it? I want to read this one, I think. The Bris Avraham. So it says that this refers to a tzaddik in the colloquial sense, a righteous person, okay? A person who follows the mitzvahs of Hashem, the commandments of Hashem. But in his mind, he might feel conflicted. He might feel desires to do something else. He might have questions. He might have doubts. However, it says here that the Yishrei Lev, those who are yasher, those who are upright of heart, they find glory. Okay, so what he's saying is that those who are upright, who are straightforward, who are honest and with conviction, they in a way find something that the colloquial tzaddik, I'm not talking about the tzaddik in the way we usually speak about it, may not find. And that is they find it on their own. They find success on their own because they're always straight. They always do the right thing. They're always looking for truth and honesty. And that reminds me of the famous story where Rebbe Nachman said his father-in-law arranged this for him to be a rav, a big rav in another town. And it would have been financial, big, huge help to him. It would have been prestigious. And he went to the Rebbe and he said, should I be a rav in the other town? And the Rebbe said, what? I'm afraid to be a Rav in the other town. I have so much Yiras Hashem. And the Rebbe said, what? Someone who isn't afraid of Hashem should be a Rav? Of course you should be a Rav. So Rebbe Nachman said, look, he said, is that the absolute truth? He says, is that the truth? Rebbe said, yes. And then he says, is that the emes or emes? Is that the real truth, the absolute truth? Or as I say, the truthiest truth? Okay, is it? And the Rebbe said, no, the emes or emes, you shouldn't be a big shot Rav. Okay, even though you can do good, don't do it. Why? Because in this instance, okay, it's not to say that some people shouldn't take that big job, but in this instance, it's not going to be good for your neshama. And this is one of the things that I see here with Daniel, like David. It's it's woven into the story of Daniel, and it's woven into this psalm, this idea that Daniel was very straight. We go back to what the Midrash says about Daniel. He was praying. He followed the command by not only not praying in public and requesting from Hashem, but even privately, where, again, no one but Hashem could see him. He didn't petition. He didn't request until his life was threatened. That's a different, then you have to sort of no holds barred. But in this instance, he just said, I'm going to be truthful. I'm going to be straightforward. And this is the kind of truth that ultimately very hard to sustain in this crooked world. My husband always quotes me this. I think it's a Gemara that says, I think with the truthful, you should be truthful, but sometimes with the crooked, you have to twist yourself up. It's very difficult. It's really difficult. Okay. And then again, he always says, but who are you to judge whether someone's truthful or not? It's a very good point. Okay. Who are we to judge? Because again, we look at this situation with the Rav and Rebbe Nachman, and we understand that there are really two truths going on here. And what might be a truth for one person, again, I'm not talking about moral relativism. No, because we don't have that. But I am talking about these kinds of decisions. It might be a truthful, good decision for one person to take that and to influence and help others. And it might be not a good decision for someone else who really needs to perfect themselves. Okay. In this instance, Rebbe Nachman was obviously, what did he end up doing? He devoted his entire life to other Jews. It's not like he didn't then go ahead to totally take care of the Kehillah and all Rebbe Nachman's followers, and they all became his followers and so on. Okay. So this is the incredible Psalm 64 with the story of Daniel woven